Hey y'all, it's Bobby Hughes with Point Firearms, and today what we're going to be going over is how to install your case feeder assembly and all the parts that goes with it on your Lee LoadMaster progressive press. So let's get started. Alright guys, so let's go ahead and get started on setting up our case feeder assembly. Okay? The first thing you're going to need is your actual feed rod retaining or retainer and nut. Alright, it's just a little assembly here. And basically what it does is it just feeds in to this little hole right here. It's a threaded hole on the frame of the press. So what we're going to do is go ahead and start it and send it into the frame of our press. Alright, now I kind of know on my press that for most everything that I reload, for my case feeder to work properly, I need to seat my retainer into my press about 4 turns. Alright, so in order for that to work, you'll notice that the rod has to set in here like this. Okay, so if you turn it and it's like this, then your rod's obviously not going to set in there because it's backwards. So what I do is when I get ready to put it in here, I start it out with the actual section of the retainer that the rod slides into in the straight up and down position so that I know, and then I make my first turn. That's 1 turn, 2, 3, 4. Alright, 4 turns. So I'm going to go ahead and lock it down there. The way you do that is you just tighten the nut up right here on the side of the press. And I don't want to tighten it up completely yet because I want to make sure that everything fits properly and is in alignment before I do that. So the next thing I'm going to do is take my actual feed rod and I'm going to place it inside of my retainer just like this. Now you want to make sure that it's nice and square with the side of the ramp here, or the feed ramp, or whatever you want to call that. So what I use is I use a carpenter's pencil, and I put the carpenter's pencil right between the ramp and the rod, and I pull it to it to make it nice and flush. Alright, now that's going to do 2 things. Because the side of the carpenter's pencil is square, it forces my feeder rod to be square, and it also puts it about the perfect distance between the actual ramp and or the slide and the rod itself, so it keeps everything nice and straight. Alright, and then what I'll do is go ahead and take a big flathead screwdriver and send the retaining bolt in to hold the rod in place. Alright, now from there, since we have the rod in place and we know it's square, we'll put the carpenter's pencil back in and hold it tight, and then we'll take a 11/16 wrench and we'll tighten our locking nut down. You don't have to torque it. You don't have to over torque anything or you'll strip it out. So anytime I take this thing apart and put it back together and all that jazz, I like to keep it, go ahead and clean my carrier here off. So just take a rag, clean up underneath. Alright, and then what I use is some synthetic motor oil. Take just a little bit of the synthetic motor oil on my finger. I'm just going to place it right up underneath here on both sides, and that just helps that case slider slide a little bit smoother. You can also put some on the slider rod too, the feed rod, but we want to wipe that off of the feed rod, but it'll work into the metal a little bit, make it nice and slick. and then wipe off any excess oil off of there so it doesn't get everything all sticky. Now the next step in this thing is to take your case slider and slide it onto here. Now there's two different case sliders. There's a tall case slider and there's a short case slider. This is your tall case slider and this is your short one. Alright? Now the short one works for anything like 9mm, 40, 45, anything like that. And the tall one is for your 38, 357, and rifle cartridges and so on and so forth. Now you'll see how the tall one actually it's beveled off there. That's good because it touches on top of the frame here. Now this one doesn't come beveled off. I actually beveled that one off myself. So I would suggest that you do that or you're going to have problems. Now I'm going to be reloading some 38 here in a little while, some 38 special. So I'm going to go ahead and install my large case slider. I'm just going to work it on there a little bit, let it soak up some of that oil. Alright, and then our next step is to take our pusher rod here, slide it into the hole on the case slider. Alright, and just let that set for a second. And then we start taking our parts to our, sorry, I can't think of the name of it. It's the crank slider. We take that and it will fit right around the feeder rod here. Let me move you around so you can see this side. On the feeder rod. And then the pusher here will slide right into it like that. Okay. And then we just take the cover and set our screws. Now my recommendation is not to torque these screws down at this point. Just slide them in there so that it holds everything together. Alright, now it's time for a test. Now what we're testing for in this one is just to make sure that the action works properly. Alright, it pushes in and then it pulls it back and then works the action back in. When on the first initial start, what happens is it pushes and seats the case into the shell plate holder and then comes back, catches a new case, or it resets here at the top, coming down, it pulls back, catches another case out of the case feeder, and then slides it up to the start point. Alright, so I think I might be in just a little bit too far on it, but we're going to go ahead and try it out and see what happens. So in order to do that, I'm just going to go ahead and install my shell plate. Alright, so I've installed my shell plate now for 38 Special, and we've got our case slider and the indexing rod and all that stuff installed. So now what I want to do is test it. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and set a case on the slide like it would be normally. Alright, and then I'm going to attempt to seat the case, which it seats, and then it comes up. And now on the way back down, I'm going to go ahead and drop another case right in here. And as I cycle forward, what I don't want to happen is I don't want my cases to touch before the indexing rod actually, or until the indexer indexes this to the next stage. Alright, so I'm sliding to the next stage, coming up, resetting, coming down. I'm going to drop another case in as if it was the case feeder, and I'm going to come all the way up as far as I can. Now it's actually not touching, which is good. Let me see if I can zoom you guys in here to show you that it's not touching. There's actually a little bitty gap, and that's about all you're going to have to play with at any given time on this machine. Alright, and then you'll see it indexes to the next, and then it pushes it forward. Alright, and then on go, it seats the case into the shell plate. We'll reset here with another one, and then it comes down. Make sure it doesn't touch, and it doesn't. Index to the next, just like that. So that's pretty much seated perfectly. Alright, now in the case that our shells actually did touch when they were butted up together, alright, meaning that they bound up, they touched and bound up, all that means is that your index retainer down here is threaded into the base too far. Alright, so what you have to do is remove your slider and your crank slider and your rod, and you're going to back this out one full turn, lock it back down, and put it all back together again, and then check it again and make sure that that works. Alright, like I said before, you also want to look to make sure that when on the go, when you're going up, that your case slider doesn't touch the frame here. Mine just barely clears it. Alright, so we're good there. If it does touch, you can usually just use a file and file off the edges of the case slider there, and it'll work just fine. Okay, so looks like we're all good there. So now what we need to do is install our actual feeder assembly here. Alright, so the way we're going to do that is on the bottom here you've got 4 tubes that feed cases. On the bottom you only have 1 tube that spits out cases at any given time. Alright, so this bolt just slides right down into a hole on the side of the carrier here. Alright, and what we want to do is go ahead and drop a case into our tube, and you can see it poking out down here. Now what I want to do is line that up on the center of that case slider, right in the center of it. Alright, and I also want to make sure that the length of the case isn't taller than where my case feeder actually sets. Okay, because if it's too short, then it'll just bunch up in there. It won't allow it to drop all the way out. If it's too tall, then they'll drop out sideways and fall off. So it's got to be just right. And this one looks like it's about perfect. It's not too tall and it's not too short. So that should work pretty good. Actually, what I might do is just lower it down just a little bit more. And that looks pretty good. Make sure that our case is lined up in the center of our case slider. And we'll go ahead and thread this other nut on here. And then we're going to use a 7/16 wrench just to torque it down a little bit. Now for your test run on this, you just want to pull it up and make sure that it doesn't rub right here between the frame and the actual case feeder. I might need to adjust that and make it a little bit lower. Drop a few cases in here just to test it out. So I hope you guys have enjoyed the video and learned how to install your Lee LoadMaster case feeder. It's a pretty straightforward, simple process. Sometimes it's a pain in the butt and you'll get really aggravated at it and want to throw it in the garbage. But once you master the system, then it becomes pretty easy and it becomes second nature to you. Alright, you'll notice that if you do have a problem, you'll get to the point where you know exactly what the root of the problem is and you can fix it right away. Once you can do that, then the Lee LoadMaster case feeder works great. The way the hopper is actually set up, you can drop your, most of the time, you can just drop your cases right in the top there and give it a little shake, And because the butt end of the case is a little bit heavier than the front end of the case, they actually drop butt first into the case feeder tubes, which works really good. Sometimes it doesn't work that way. Sometimes you'll get them that drop in backwards, but for the most part it works out pretty good. So for the price, I think it's a lot more affordable and pretty efficient. So anyway, that's how you install your Lee LoadMaster case feeder. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Rate the video if you enjoyed it, if you got something out of it. Also, any questions or comments, leave them below. And please consider subscribing to Point Firearms YouTube channel. Until next time, guys, get out there, shoot some guns, be safe, and most importantly, have fun. See you guys later.